by putting sanctions on Russia, it's very similar to what Trudeau did in Canada by seizing the bank accounts of protesters. And the government said, we've got the right to take all your money. If that doesn't scare your listeners, they need to think about it. The United States has just said, we want to take your money. You could be anywhere in the world, and we're going to take it. And that's very chilling. Lots and lots of people smarter than me have been calling for a crash for years, and it's here, period. And hyperinflation's here. We're going to get caught in a perfect storm where everything goes wrong at exactly the same time.
Here at Liberty and Finance, we're licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. We are standing by the inventory, ready to make sure you get what you need, even into the wee hours of night and on weekends, because preparedness doesn't stop. Call us 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend Bob Moriarty. He is the author of numerous books, including The Art of Peace, Basic Investing in Resource Stocks, The Idiot's Guide. And Bob also has an incredible background in the Marines and also being a naval aviator pilot. He was the youngest naval aviator pilot in the Vietnam War, actually. And so we really wanted to have him on again because he's one of our viewers' favorite guests. And with everything going on, your background, Bob, in military is going to be very helpful for today's discussion. So we really appreciate you joining us today.
Interesting you say that. And The Art of Peace talks about war, but it also talks about the collapse of the financial system. And on the last page of the book, and the book was written in 2016, I said that we weren't going to have a financial crash coming. We were actually in a financial crash that most people didn't recognize. And when the banks closed and seized everybody's money, we were going to have our first worldwide revolution. And I want to be absolutely crystal clear. The sanctions that we're putting on Russia are going to cause total financial chaos, probably destroy the euro, probably destroy the dollar. And there are going to be millions of people starving. There are going to be millions of people who can't afford food. And we are going to have revolution, so we're going to have change of governments.
Now, if you can expand on this, why do you think the sanctions in Russia will have a direct impact on the U.S. dollar and the euro?
Because, quite bluntly, we've got 10% inflation right now, up from 7.9% a month ago. They just raised the interest rates 0.25%. Frankly, 2% interest is not going to have any impact whatsoever on 10% inflation. But between Russia and Ukraine, they produce about 30 or 40% of the world's wheat. And Russia is the 9th largest producer of energy in the world. Now, all you have to do is take that off, and you've got a situation where a supply crisis was severe. It just went curvilinear to that's a nuclear explosion in the financial system. The United States economy is no longer based on producing anything. All we're doing is shifting $100 bills around, and that isn't a real economy. But by putting sanctions on Russia, it's very similar to what Trudeau did in Canada by seizing the bank accounts of protesters. When those people donated to the truckers, it was perfectly legal. And the protest was perfectly legal. And the government said, we've got the right to take all your money. If that doesn't scare your listeners, they need to think about it. The United States has just said, we want to take your money. You could be anywhere in the world, and we're going to take it. And that's very chilling.
It is, especially that pretty much all our finances for most people nowadays are completely digital. So it's like if the government can just seize that, that's very chilling, as you mentioned. Now, with respect to what's happening right now, I mean, we're already seeing, you could say, the destruction of the dollar as we see inflation nearing 10%, 7.9% being the official numbers at the moment. And the Fed is trying to raise interest rates at the moment, but it doesn't seem like that is going to have any impact. Your take on inflation right now, and can anything be done to stop it?
No. And what we did is we just went from inflation to hyperinflation. Did you see what nickel did one day last week?
Yeah, it doubled in one day, and then they shut down the exchange.
Well, it's worse than that. Since January, it's up 500%. One day last week, it climbed 111%. There was a $6 billion margin call on a Chinese investor from Singapore. And they stopped trading, and then they opened it up. But what I'm getting at is when you have a piece of machinery that's barely working and you want to fix it, do not take a sledgehammer to it. And that's what Biden and the EU has done. And they basically have said, your money is our money if we decide. And that certainly would have sent a message to China, and it had the effect of moving the center of gravity of the world's financial system about 5,000 miles to the east. We just gave China and Russia total power. All Russia has to do to sell its wheat or to sell its oil is to demand payment in gold.
Now, you've mentioned recently on another podcast with Proven and Probable, our friend Maurice Jackson over there, you mentioned that really the whole approach to the current conflict, war in Ukraine and Russia, is incorrect, right? It could be solved very easily. Can you share your insights on that and your take on that?
Let me tell you a little story. When I was in Vietnam, and I was there from July of 1968 till March of 1970, we realized the United States wasn't going to win the war. And there were lots of discussions, lots of arguments over it. And the best argument that I've ever seen against war is to ask someone, okay, define victory. How are we going to win in Vietnam? And of course, people would say, well, gee, I don't know. But if you cannot define victory, you cannot get to victory. Now, I would maintain that Putin has actually already won the war because, in fact, he forced the United States into making an incredibly stupid decision. It's going to go down in history as the dumbest geopolitical decision in world history. The impact is just starting up. When you see nickel up 111% one day, you can't argue that we don't have hyperinflation. We do have hyperinflation. But under the Biden administration, the price of gasoline has doubled since he took office. We got 2 million people who crossed the border illegally and been brought into the United States. The United States is totally out of control. We need leadership, and frankly, we're not getting it.
Now, when it comes to the issues that we're seeing right now, and you say that we're really heading towards an economic collapse, hyperinflation, this has all been building up for the last 6 months. What are some of the events, if you could reiterate for our viewers, that have led us here?
$30 trillion in debt. Here's something that, to the best of my knowledge, nobody else has ever talked to. It's very important for people to understand. When governments spend money, they have to collect it. Okay? Nobody understands that, but it's absolute. You cannot spend money without collecting money. And there's 3 different ways that governments can collect money. They can collect it in taxes, which are always unpopular. they can collect an inflation, okay, which everybody thinks the price of gas has gone up because of Putin. Well, no, actually it doubled in the last year before Putin did anything. Or they can default. And quite bluntly, I don't think they can inflate away the $30 trillion. I think there's a default. When Nixon took us off the gold standard in August of 1971, he set something in motion. The United States has had the world's reserve currency since Bretton Woods in 1944, and that gave you the ability to use your uncle's Platinum American Express card, but you don't ever have to pay the bills. Well, the piper just came to the door and said, hey, you need to start paying your bills. We have given our manufacturing capacity to China, so China's thriving, Russia's actually thriving, and the United States has a economy built on a foundation of quicksand.
And what you see ahead, we've talked about this in previous interviews, and you actually kind of predicted this, I believe, back in December, is this stock crash that we've been seeing. We've only gone down about 10% or so since the peak, but you're expecting a 90% decline in the Dow and S&P, and it's going to take about 2 to 3 years to play out. Can you give us an update on this and where we are right now?
The interesting thing is that for the last year, I was predicting a market crash starting in October. And I realized that even though the Dow and the S&P peaked in early January, the internals of the market have been collapsing, and 50% of the small cap stocks were down 20, 30, 40%. So the crash really started in October. It became obvious in the last month or two. But, if you go back to January 1980, silver was $50.25 an ounce. 5 years later, it was $5 an ounce. So crashes of 90% are not particularly unusual. Actually, they're quite common. We have the most out-of-balance financial system in American history, and the only way to cure it is to let it cure itself. And the Fed is utterly trapped. If they raise interest rates, they shoot the deficit through the roof, and it becomes obvious to everybody. So lots and lots of people smarter than me have been calling for a crash for years, and it's here, period. And hyperinflation's here. When you have a commodity like nickel up 500% in 3 months, you've got hyperinflation. And it's going to get worse. There are empty shelves on stores all over the United States, and there are going to be far more of those in the future because farmers cannot afford fertilizer and they can't afford diesel for planting because of the high cost. So we're going to get caught in a perfect storm where everything goes wrong at exactly the same time.
And how do our viewers take action and prepare for that?
I wish that I sold gold and silver, because then people would say it's got some kind of vested interest, but I don't have a vested interest. Literally, if the government can go into a bank and seize your bank account, and they can go into the bank and seize your safety deposit box, if you can't hold it in your hands, you don't own it. So you would want gold, silver, platinum, palladium, rhodium. Commodities are due for a correction, and probably a big correction, but some things like lead and zinc and copper are already in shortage. We have a financial system that's broken, and it's going to take time to fix it. And it's going to take somebody a lot smarter than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to fix it.
What other steps are you taking as well? I know there's a lot of movements really since COVID for people to start moving outside of cities and start homesteading, growing their own food. Your take on all that?
It's funny you say that, because in Germany in 1922 and 1923, because of hyperinflation, people starved. But they didn't starve because there wasn't any food. They starved because the farmers couldn't afford to get the food to the cities. So being out of major cities and having a garden just makes all the sense in the world. And I'm getting together with some of my neighbors here, and we're going to put in a big garden, because one of the fatal flaws of owning a garden is if you got the most wonderful garden in the world and your neighbor's starving, you got a problem. That's going to be an issue. But we hadn't discussed this before the show, but some of the things the United States is doing in Ukraine literally threaten a nuclear exchange. One of the things I'm going to say that I am absolutely certain of, Putin is not going to lose this war. He knows it's the intent of the neocons, intent of the military-industrial complex to destroy him and to destroy Russia. He will push the button first. It would take one EMP weapon 300 miles over Kansas to kill 90% of Americans in 1 year. All of these people on CNN, CNBC, Fox News, all of these people advocating war against Russia or acts of military aggression against Russia are threatening a guy who has a thumb and a button, and it's connected to nuclear weapons. Now, I'm sorry, that is utterly insane, okay? You don't threaten your neighbor if he's nuclear armed, period. You listen to him say, hey, pal, what's your problem? What can we do to work it out? Now, the United States has to learn we cannot rule the rest of the world. We can't even rule Washington, D.C.
If we put aside for a second the possibility of nuclear war, because it seems like obviously no one can survive that unless we're off in an island somewhere. It sounds like what you're saying is that really it's very important to definitely grow your own food, but also be in community as well and know your neighbors. Because, if your neighbor doesn't have a garden and you have a garden, then that's an issue if something breaks out. Well, Bob Moriarty, we really appreciate your time today and all your insights. If our viewers are interested in checking out your books, we'll put a link to your Amazon author page in the description of this video. I'd like to definitely check out The Art of Peace that you wrote, especially in these times. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
Okay, thank you. You always do great interviews.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we will let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be double boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Elijah, my brother Kaiser, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.